Right now in eastern Georgia, investigators are working to learn what and who damaged the Georgia Guidestones. So far, we know part of the 42-year-old monument.
For decades, the Georgia Guidestones stood quietly in Georgia, full of strange messages carved in stone. No one really knew who built them or why. But now, AI has scanned the stones and uncovered secrets that left scientists completely speechless. Hidden patterns, unknown codes, and strange warnings are coming to light. Things people never imagined were there. Could these stones really be a guide for the future, or are they hiding something darker? Join us as we explore the Guidestones like never before, uncovering hidden truths that could change everything we thought we knew about this mysterious monument. The monument that refused to stay silent. For many years, the Georgia Guidestones stood quietly in a wide open field in rural Georgia. There were no guards, no fences at first, and no long explanations telling people what to think. The stones were simply there, tall, heavy, still. They looked old, but they were not ancient. They looked simple, but they were carefully planned. Most people who passed by did not understand them, but they felt something strange standing near them. The monument was made of huge slabs of granite, arranged in a careful pattern. They were placed to face the sky, not the road. Holes and slots in the stone lined up with the sun and the stars. At certain times of the year, light passed through the stones in a very exact way. This was not an accident. It showed planning, patience, and knowledge. Whoever built the Guidestones did not just want them to be seen. They wanted them to work. For a long time, people treated the Guidestones like a mystery or a joke. Some called them art. Others called them creepy. Some thought they were just a tourist attraction. But a few people felt uneasy about them. The words carved into the granite were not friendly. They did not tell stories or celebrate history. They gave instructions. 10 short rules about how humans should live after a great disaster. One rule stood above all the others. It talked about keeping the human population under 500 million. This number shocked people. It was not written as an idea or a suggestion. It was written as a rule. Many visitors felt cold when they read it. They asked themselves why someone would carve such a message into stone and leave it there for the future. For decades, the Guidestones stayed in place. People argued about them online. Protesters painted them. Others cleaned them. But no one truly studied them in a deep, serious way. Not like a scientist studies a problem. Not like a researcher studies data. The stones were treated as symbols, not systems, that changed after they were destroyed. One early morning, an explosion broke the silence. Part of the monument was damaged, and within hours, the rest of the stones were taken down. By the end of the day, they were gone. No rebuilding followed. No clear answers came. The field was left empty, like the monument had never existed, but something unexpected happened next. Because the stones were gone, people began to look at them more closely than ever before. Old photographs, measurements, blueprints, and satellite images were gathered. Three-dimensional models were rebuilt on computers. What once stood in a field was now rebuilt in data. This made it possible for a new kind of observer to study the Guidestones. When researchers fed the Guidestones into AI systems, they did not expect surprises. The monument had been standing for decades. Everyone thought its secrets were already known. But AI does not see things the way humans do. It compares shapes, distances, alignments, and language without emotion. It notices repetition. It notices structure. What it found forced people to stop and look again. The Georgia Guidestones were no longer just strange stones from the past. They became a puzzle that might still be speaking. And the first question was no longer who destroyed them. The real question became why they were built this way at all. What the AI found hidden in the monument's relationship with the stars would prove even more disturbing than the messages carved into its surface. A stone machine built to read the sky. The artificial intelligence analysis identified the Georgia Guidestones as a functional astronomical instrument within the first week of data processing. This wasn't interpretation or theory. The mathematical precision of the alignments proved intentional design beyond any reasonable doubt. The center stone contained the most obvious astronomical feature. A hole had been drilled completely through the granite at eye level, positioned at an angle of 34.2 degrees from horizontal. This wasn't a random number. It precisely matched the latitude of Elbert County, Georgia, creating a sightline pointed directly at Polaris, the North Star. Polaris sits almost exactly above Earth's North Pole. Polaris remains essentially stationary as the Earth rotates, unlike other stars. This makes it the single most important navigational reference in the Northern Hemisphere. Ancient sailors used it to determine direction. Modern surveyors still use it to establish the true north. Any civilization trying to rebuild navigation, cartography, or astronomy after a collapse would need to locate Polaris first. But the polar alignment represented just one element of a more complex system. The center stone also featured a vertical slot cut from top to bottom, precisely 7 inches wide. This slot was positioned to track the sun's annual movement through the sky. At noon on the spring equinox, around March 20th, and again on the fall equinox near September 22nd, sunlight shines directly through this slot and illuminates a specific point on the ground below. These equinoxes mark the 2 days each year when daylight and darkness last exactly 12 hours each. They represent crucial calendar points for any agricultural society. The outer stones also marked the summer and winter solstices. These represent the year's longest and shortest days, occurring around June 21st and December 21st. The AI identified these solstice alignments by tracking shadow patterns and sun angles, then compared them to astronomical databases showing solar positions throughout the year. The matches were exact. The stones functioned as a permanent solar calendar, accurate enough to track seasonal changes indefinitely. Perhaps most remarkably, the capstone contained a small hole drilled at an angle to track the sun's daily movement. As sunlight passed through this hole, it created a beam that moved across markings on the center stone, functioning as a rudimentary clock. The AI determined this feature could indicate time of day with reasonable accuracy, certainly sufficient for coordinating agricultural or communal activities. These astronomical features weren't decorative. They served practical purposes essential for any society trying to maintain or rebuild civilization. Agriculture requires accurate seasonal calendars. Navigation requires reliable directional references. Timekeeping requires methods for dividing days into manageable units. The Guidestones provided all three, using nothing but granite, sunlight, and the predictable movements of celestial objects. This represented a level of long-term planning that disturbed many researchers. Someone had built these stones expecting they would still be needed centuries or millennia in the future, expected that human civilization would collapse so completely that survivors wouldn't even know how to read the sky, expected to provide not just ideas or philosophy, but actual functional tools for people who had lost everything. But the astronomical functions were just the beginning. What the AI discovered when it turned its attention to the monument's physical structure and proportions would reveal an even deeper level of intentional design. Turning granite into data. The destruction of the Georgia Guidestones created an unusual problem for researchers. Traditional archaeological methods require physical access to the object being studied. The explosion reduced over 100 tons of precisely positioned granite to fragments. Local authorities bulldozed what remained within 24 hours of the blast. The debris was hauled away and disposed of. Within one day, 4 decades of potential physical evidence had been permanently scattered. For conventional archaeological teams, this would have ended any possibility of serious study. You cannot excavate a site that has been cleared. You cannot measure structures that have been demolished. You cannot analyze alignments when the aligned objects are gone. Artificial intelligence operates differently. AI systems don't require physical access to objects. They need data. And fortunately, the Guidestones had been extensively documented through photography over their 42-year existence. Research teams began systematic collection of every available image, measurement, and recording related to the monument. They gathered professional survey data from the original 1980 construction. They downloaded satellite photographs from Google Earth showing the site from directly overhead. They collected tourist snapshots posted on social media platforms, even drone footage filmed by independent videographers. The collected material went into photogrammetry software. This technology allows artificial intelligence to analyze multiple photographs of the same object taken from different positions and reconstruct accurate three-dimensional models. The process identifies matching points that appear in multiple images. The AI processed these matching points across thousands of images, calculating spatial relationships between them. Gradually, it built a complete digital reconstruction. The resulting three-dimensional model achieved accuracy within millimeters for most features. Researchers could now take precise measurements of a structure that no longer physically existed. But photogrammetry provided more than simple reconstruction. The AI could analyze the monument from perspectives that had been impossible when the stones were standing. It could examine features too high to reach from ground level. It could measure angles invisible from any single viewpoint. It could simulate how sunlight would interact with surfaces at any time throughout any season. The digital reconstruction revealed details that human observers had missed during 4 decades of physical access. The AI measured spacing between the outer stones and discovered mathematical ratios, simple fractions that repeated throughout the design. Proportions that appeared in multiple locations like architectural themes deliberately echoed across the structure. Certain measurements corresponded to significant astronomical numbers. The height of specific stones related to Earth's axial tilt. Distances between features matched the length of the solar year when expressed in certain units. These were precise mathematical relationships embedded in the physical dimensions. But the AI's analysis of the monument's geometry would reveal something unexpected. Hidden in the spacing and dimensions were patterns that suggested the stones contained information beyond what was carved into their surfaces. Patterns humans never fully noticed. The artificial intelligence analysis moved beyond simple reconstruction and began examining relationships between the monument's physical features. What it discovered suggested a level of intentional design that human observers had completely overlooked during 42 years of direct access to the structure. The spacing between the 4 outer stones followed precise mathematical ratios. The AI measured distances from multiple reference points and found these measurements weren't arbitrary. They formed simple fractions that appeared repeatedly throughout the design. One distance would be exactly 1 1/2 times another distance. A different measurement would be precisely 2/3 of a third measurement. These proportional relationships occurred too frequently to be coincidental. The ratios matched patterns found in classical architecture and sacred geometry. Ancient builders used similar proportions in structures ranging from Greek temples to Egyptian pyramids. The relationships create visual harmony that humans perceive as aesthetically pleasing, even when they cannot consciously identify why. Someone designing the Guidestones had deliberately incorporated these mathematical principles into the physical layout. The AI also identified numerical patterns in the monument's dimensions when converted between different measurement systems. The height of the center stone expressed in feet corresponded to significant astronomical values when converted to meters. The width of the outer stones in inches related to Earth's axial precession cycle when converted to centimeters. These connections weren't obvious because they required translation between measurement systems, something human observers rarely do spontaneously. More remarkably, the AI discovered that certain stone dimensions encoded the monument's geographic coordinates. The ratio between specific measurements, when calculated to sufficient decimal places, approximated the latitude and longitude of the site itself. This represented an extremely sophisticated form of information encoding. The structure literally contained data about its own location embedded in its physical proportions. The analysis revealed patterns in how the inscriptions were distributed across the stone surfaces. The AI measured the area devoted to each language and found they weren't equal. Some languages received more space than others, but the proportions followed a deliberate pattern related to the number of speakers of each language at the time of construction. Even the thickness of the stones followed mathematical principles. The AI measured variations across different sections and discovered the thickness changed according to structural engineering requirements. Thicker sections appeared exactly where stress analysis predicted they would be needed to support the monument's weight. Thinner sections occurred where material could be removed without compromising stability. Someone had performed detailed structural calculations before construction. These patterns demonstrated something crucial about the monument's creator. This wasn't an amateur with strange ideas and excess money. This was someone with deep knowledge of mathematics, engineering, architecture, and astronomy. Someone who understood how to encode multiple layers of information into a single physical structure. Someone who expected future observers to discover these patterns and recognize the sophistication behind the design. But the most revealing patterns weren't in the stone's dimensions or spacing. They were in the words carved into the granite surfaces, and what the AI found when it analyzed those messages would prove deeply disturbing. One voice across many languages. The Georgia Guidestones displayed their 10 rules in 12 different writing systems. 8 modern languages appeared on the monument: English, Spanish, Swahili, Hindi, Hebrew, Arabic, Chinese, and Russian. 4 ancient scripts were also included: Babylonian cuneiform, Classical Greek, Sanskrit, and Egyptian hieroglyphics. Most observers assumed these were simply translations, the same message repeated in different languages for maximum accessibility. The artificial intelligence analysis revealed something more complex. When the AI compared the structure and phrasing across all 12 versions, it found remarkable consistency that went beyond simple translation. The word choices, sentence structures, and even the rhythm of the phrasing aligned in ways that suggested a single author carefully controlling how the message appeared in every language. Translation normally introduces variation. Different languages have different grammatical rules, different ways of expressing concepts, different cultural contexts that influence word choice. A message translated by 12 different people into 12 different languages would show significant divergence in tone, emphasis, and style, even while conveying the same basic meaning. The Guidestones showed minimal divergence. The AI analyzed syntactic patterns and found that sentences in different languages maintained parallel structures wherever the grammar of each language allowed. When one version used active voice, the others did too. When one version employed a particular rhetorical device, equivalent devices appeared in the other languages. This level of coordination required either a single polyglot author fluent in all 12 writing systems or an extremely disciplined translation team working from detailed instructions. The philosophical consistency proved even more striking. The 10 rules formed a coherent worldview with clear priorities and assumptions. Rule 1 established population limits. Rule 2 addressed genetic fitness. Rule 3 discussed language. Each subsequent rule built on previous ones, creating a logical progression from population control through governance to spiritual matters. This wasn't a random collection of ideas. It was a systematic philosophy with population management as its foundational principle. The AI identified this by analyzing the semantic relationships between rules. It mapped which concepts appeared in multiple rules, which rules referenced ideas established in earlier rules, and how the sequence created a hierarchical structure of priorities. Population control appeared first because every subsequent rule depended on it. You cannot maintain nature in balance, ensure fair laws, or resolve disputes peacefully if population exceeds carrying capacity. The ordering was deliberate and logical. The ancient scripts received particular attention in the AI analysis. Some researchers had speculated these were added for mystique rather than genuine communication. The AI compared the ancient text with the modern translations and found they conveyed identical messages with equal precision. Someone had gone to considerable effort to ensure that even people reading Babylonian cuneiform or Egyptian hieroglyphics would receive exactly the same philosophical framework as English or Chinese readers. This linguistic coordination pointed to a single mind behind the monument. One person or one tightly coordinated group with a unified vision. The message wasn't collaborative or democratic. It represented one consistent worldview expressed through multiple linguistic channels, but never varying in its core philosophy. And at the center of that philosophy sat one specific number that appeared to drive every other principle carved into the stone. The number that anchored the message. The first rule carved into the Georgia Guidestones read, "Maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature." This wasn't a suggestion buried somewhere in the middle of the text. It was rule number 1, the foundation, the principle upon which every other rule depended. The artificial intelligence analysis identified this population figure as the organizing concept behind the entire monument. When the AI mapped the logical relationships between all 10 rules, it found that 9 of them either directly supported or logically followed from maintaining a global population of 500 million people. Rule 2 discussed guided reproduction to improve fitness and diversity. This only makes sense in the context of population control. If you're trying to keep humanity under a specific number, you need mechanisms to determine who reproduces and how often. Rule 3 addressed creating a new universal language, easier to accomplish with 500 million people than with 8 billion. Rule 4 discussed passion, faith, and tradition being tempered with reason. Population control requires convincing people to limit reproduction despite biological and cultural drives to have children. The remaining rules followed similar patterns. Fair laws and just courts become more manageable in a smaller population. International disputes decrease when fewer nations compete for resources. Balance between personal rights and social duties matters more when carrying capacity is limited. The sequence wasn't arbitrary. Each rule existed to support or extend the implications of that first population target. The AI compared this number to actual population control proposals from the 20th century. 500 million wasn't random. It appeared in academic papers and policy discussions about sustainable global population during the 1960s and 70s. Environmental scientists calculated how many humans Earth could support indefinitely without depleting resources or causing ecological collapse. Estimates varied, but 500 million appeared frequently as an upper limit for truly sustainable civilization. This represented approximately 7% of Earth's population when the Guidestones were constructed in 1980. Global population then stood near 4.5 billion. Reaching 500 million would require reducing humanity by roughly 90%. The monument offered no explanation of how this reduction should occur. No timeline, no mechanism, just the target number presented as the necessary foundation for every other principle. The other rules were written as if the 500 million population already existed. They described how to govern that smaller population, how to organize it, how to maintain it. The monument appeared to assume the reduction had already happened and was providing instructions for what comes after. This framing suggested the Guidestones weren't trying to prevent collapse. They were preparing for it. Someone had concluded that global population would drop dramatically through war, disease, famine, or environmental catastrophe. The monument existed to ensure that whoever survived understood how to prevent the population from growing back to unsustainable levels. The question became, Who believed this strongly enough to spend a fortune encoding these ideas in granite while hiding their identity behind carefully constructed anonymity? The man behind the mask. The Georgia Guidestones were commissioned by a man calling himself R.C. Christian. Everyone involved in the monument's construction knew this wasn't his real name. He admitted it openly. He told the granite company president that he represented a small group of Americans who wanted to remain anonymous. He paid in cash. He provided precise specifications for the monument's design. Then he disappeared, leaving behind only the pseudonym and the stones. For 42 years, researchers attempted to identify who R.C. Christian actually was. The mystery became one of the monument's most intriguing elements. Dozens of candidates were proposed. Conspiracy theorists suggested secret societies, billionaire eugenicists, or government agencies. None of the theories produced convincing evidence. The artificial intelligence analysis took a different approach. Instead of searching for the person, it analyzed the monument itself as evidence of the creator's knowledge, beliefs, and capabilities. What kind of person could design something like this? What expertise would they need? What resources would they require? What worldview would they hold? The AI built a profile based on demonstrable facts. The creator understood advanced astronomy and knew how to translate that knowledge into permanent physical alignments. They possessed engineering expertise sufficient to design a structure that would remain stable for millennia. They had access to significant financial resources, enough to commission custom granite work and pay for professional installation. They understood multiple languages or had connections to expert translators. They held strong beliefs about population control and sustainability. This profile matched a specific individual remarkably well. Herbert Hinsey Kirsten, a physician and conservative political activist who lived in Iowa. Kirsten had written extensively about population control during the 1960s and 70s. His published articles advocated for strict limits on global population to prevent environmental collapse. His arguments closely paralleled the philosophy carved into the Guidestones. Kirsten possessed the necessary resources. He came from a wealthy family and had a successful medical practice. He had the education to understand the scientific principles involved. He had the ideological motivation to fund such a project. And he had expressed interest in creating permanent monuments to conservative principles. The AI strengthened this connection by analyzing the specific phrasing used in the Guidestones inscriptions. It compared the word choices, sentence structures, and rhetorical patterns to Kirsten's published writings. Natural language processing algorithms identified linguistic fingerprints, the subtle patterns in how individuals construct sentences and choose words. These patterns remain remarkably consistent across a person's lifetime of writing. The match wasn't perfect, but it was strong. Phrases that appeared in the Guidestones text showed up in Kirsten's articles using similar grammatical structures. The prioritization of concepts matched his published priorities. The philosophical framework aligned with his documented beliefs. The AI calculated the probability that two different people would show this level of linguistic and ideological overlap by chance. The results suggested the same mind was behind both the published articles and the monument's inscriptions. Additional circumstantial evidence supported the connection. Kirsten had traveled to Georgia during the period when the monument was being commissioned. Financial records showed large cash withdrawals consistent with the project's costs. Associates recalled him discussing plans for a permanent monument, though he never specified details. The AI analysis couldn't prove definitively that Kirsten was R.C. Christian. Absolute proof would require documentation that Kirsten had apparently destroyed or hidden successfully. But the convergence of linguistic patterns, ideological alignment, financial capacity, and circumstantial evidence created a compelling case. The Guidestones appeared to be the work of one disciplined individual with consistent beliefs about humanity's future. Understanding who built the monument helped researchers understand why it was built. This wasn't a collaborative effort or a symbolic gesture. It was one person's attempt to influence what rises from the ashes after civilization collapses. But the most disturbing conclusions came when the AI analyzed what the monument was actually designed to accomplish and what that suggested about the builder's expectations for humanity's future. Instructions for a world after us. Artificial intelligence reached its most significant conclusion after analyzing all previous findings together. The Georgia Guidestones were not a warning. They were not a philosophical statement meant to inspire contemporary society toward better choices. They were a functional instruction manual designed for survivors of a catastrophic population collapse. Every element of the monument's design supported this interpretation. The astronomical alignments provided practical tools for timekeeping and navigation when technology fails. The use of granite ensured the structure would survive environmental disasters that would destroy paper, digital storage, and most other materials. The messages were carved deep enough to remain legible for thousands of years, despite weathering. The location in rural Georgia placed it away from major population centers likely to be destroyed in wars or disasters. Most tellingly, the 10 rules were written in present tense as instructions for an existing situation, not future goals to work toward. Maintain humanity under 500 million assumed the population had already been reduced to that level. Guide reproduction wisely implied an ongoing system rather than a proposal. Unite humanity with a living new language suggested survivors would be building something new rather than reforming what exists. The AI compared this structure to other historical attempts to preserve knowledge for future civilizations. Ancient libraries tried to preserve information about the past. The Svalbard Seed Vault stores genetic material for crops. NASA's golden records attached to Voyager spacecraft carry information about human culture. All of these projects attempt to preserve what currently exists. The Guidestones were different. They didn't try to preserve current civilization. They provided a blueprint for building something new after current civilization ends. The distinction matters enormously. Preservation assumes something worth saving. A blueprint assumes starting over from scratch. The population figure of 500 million reinforced this interpretation. When the monument was built in 1980, global population stood at approximately 4.5 billion. Today, it exceeds 8 billion. Reaching 500 million requires a reduction of over 90%. No gradual policy or voluntary program could achieve this. Only catastrophe on an almost unimaginable scale could reduce global population to that level. The builder appeared to expect such a catastrophe. They invested significant resources into ensuring that survivors would have guidance for preventing population from growing back to unsustainable levels. They wanted to influence what civilization emerges after the collapse, to prevent the survivors from repeating mistakes that led to the disaster. Scientists studying the AI's conclusions found this deeply unsettling. The monument represented someone who had given up on preventing collapse and focused instead on controlling what comes after. Someone who believed catastrophic population reduction was inevitable, or perhaps even necessary. Someone who wanted their specific ideology to guide the rebuilding of human civilization. The astronomical features supported this long-term vision. You don't build a stone calendar designed to function for 10,000 years if you expect current civilization to continue. Electronic devices provide more accurate timekeeping than stone alignments. GPS navigation surpasses any granite compass. The astronomical features only become valuable after modern technology stops working. The AI analysis couldn't determine what specific catastrophe the builder anticipated. Nuclear war, environmental collapse, pandemic disease, resource depletion, or some combination could reduce population to 500 million. The monument didn't specify because it didn't matter. Whatever the cause, the Guidestones were built to outlast it and guide whoever survived. The destruction of the monument in 2022 eliminated this blueprint before any catastrophe occurred. Whether that represents a loss or a benefit remains a matter of intense debate among researchers who studied the AI's findings. The Georgia Guidestones are gone, but the questions they raised about who gets to plan humanity's future remain carved into the historical record as permanently as messages in granite. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.